Good evening, we're about to start, so thank you so much for coming. Just one housekeeping item, the event is getting live streamed on Instagram, and if any of you are social media users, please use the hashtag BellyWomanLaunch on either Twitter or Instagram. So firstly, thank you so much for coming. It's so exciting to share this launch of Belly Woman, Birth, Blood and Ebola, the Untold Story by Dr. Benjamin Black. And also to do it here at the iconic Frontline Club is absolutely fabulous. So thank you all. My name is Archna Sharma and I'm the founder of Neem Press. We publish books that broaden and change perspectives and amplify voices that perhaps the mainstream publishers don't wish to tackle. So I'll introduce you to Benjamin. A lot of you obviously are here because you already know him personally, but hopefully this will go out to a much wider audience, so I think we'll do a formal introduction of Benjamin. So Dr. Benjamin Black is a consultant obstetrician and gynecologist in London and a specialist advisor to international aid organisations. His focus on sexual, reproductive and maternal health care for populations in times of crisis has taken him to many countries. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, he provided frontline healthcare to pregnant women and supported international guidelines development. Benjamin also teaches medical teams around the world on improving sexual and reproductive healthcare to the most vulnerable people in the most challenging environments. So I wanted to start off by sort of talking about why we as a publisher took the book on and why we are so excited to be publishing it. There are actually really three main reasons. The first of it is exquisitely written. I would challenge all of you to pick up that book and not go through a wide range of emotions and not be moved to tears at times. It is gloriously written. And secondly, I would say that although it is a specific story, what appealed to us was that it is actually a universal story. It is universal in how entrenched global governance structures, if you like, determine how quickly and in what quantity and quality aid gets to certain areas. We've all seen over the years how certain events receive higher profile in the press and certainly attract more finances. So for us, although it's a very specific story about Sierra Leone and Ebola, for me, it certainly reflected a much broader perspective on how aid gets to countries. And thirdly, this is very important, for non-fiction, the experience and expertise of the author is key. And Benjamin really exemplifies this. He is actually one of the very few people who could have written this book. He's steeped in this world from a very practical and emotional level. He's taken risks, personal risks, he's walked the walk, and he's given his whole. So, yes, he's very, very proud to be publishing Benjamin's book. So with that, I'll turn it over to Benjamin. So Benjamin, what made you decide to write the book? It's a huge task, we know that. Physically, emotionally, I think there are a few authors in this crowd, and I'm sure that you will acknowledge that it is a huge undertaking. So that's one question. And what do you hope readers will take away from your memoir?
Thanks. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much for everybody who's come here this evening, taking the time to be here. It's really appreciated. So, in answer to the questions, what made me decide to write Belly Woman? Let me take you back to August 2014, where I was working in Sierra Leone, and I was working at that time on the border with Guinea, as the Ebola epidemic was really exploding around us, and it was not a place that I planned to be. This was not a book that I planned to write. In August, what I and my colleagues, many who are here this evening, were witnessing was on a scale that none of us could have imagined. And I, at that time, and you'll know if you read the book, at that time I realised that this had to be written, this had to be documented, and that there were not many of us who were going to be in a position to do that. As things worked out, I ended up spending almost 2 years working in the response. I was there right through to the end and in the aftermath. And you know, there was so much that I wanted to share, and I felt that this was going to be the best way to do it. When I was out there, I hadn't been a writer. I hadn't written articles before, but I started documenting some of those experiences in blogs for MSF, and then also in some newspapers, sort of as a testimony for what was being seen. And I received, you know, good feedback, and I was encouraged to sit down and really try and pull this together. But I never, never kept a diary. I never planned this out. It was after I got back that I sat down and in quite a cathartic way, to be honest, tried to get those emotions down onto paper. As far as what I hope people who read this book will take away with them, well, probably a few things. Firstly, I want to stress that this is a story. Although it's non-fiction, it's not a textbook. It's a story. It's got a beginning, a middle, and end, and it's something that can be sat down and can be read and can be enjoyed, even though it is at times can be a difficult read, can be emotionally challenging. I hope that people will find it eye-opening and perhaps inspirational, but mostly something that's enjoyable. I hope that the main thing I hope that people will take away from this is that the next time that you're watching the news and there's an earthquake, or you're hearing about a refugee crisis, perhaps people fleeing from Ukraine, or a famine, as is happening right now in Somalia, that you question what's happening behind this headline to women and girls, to pregnant people that need healthcare. What stories are we not being told? And the answers to that you'll find in Belly Woman. But I think it's really important that we question what we don't get given in the news, because what we see is just the tip. It's just the bit that's chosen for us to hear. But in all of these crises, there is an absolute mass of complex sub-crises that are happening below, and if we don't talk about them, and if we don't raise them ourselves, then they won't ever get the coverage that they need. In addition, of course, it is a testimony of the Ebola outbreak. It's a testimony that really you won't find anywhere else. You'll find plenty of books about Ebola, but you won't find a book which is written that tells you really the full story, the key crises, the ethical conundrums that we were faced with from the absolute front line, from someone who was in the room, in those discussions, who was debating those impossible decisions with colleagues, who can look back and see the criticisms that were made, but also understand how it came to be that those decisions happened. And I actually wrote this book, the first draft, in 2018, which was pre-COVID, and of course, it doesn't take much to see the similarities and to see all the options, all the opportunities that we had to learn from not just the Ebola epidemic, from other crises that we did not learn from when it came to COVID. And you don't need me to tell you what they are, because they're so obvious as you read it, and I hope that readers will be as frustrated and as angry as I was during COVID, and as I still am today when I reflect on it.
I think one of the points that you've made is that often in pandemics and epidemics, actually women's health does not feature highly on the focus of either healthcare communities, or can you expand a little bit on that?
you know, there's a saying that, I should say actually, I've been told that I'm really good at going very serious very quickly. And I appreciate that this is a serious book and these are serious questions, but I just want to say, if I'm getting too serious, you can just heckle me, because this is also a party. But in answer to the question, there's a saying that, you know, if you want to know the health of a society, the true health of a society, not just the physical health, but the functionality of that society, do the systems in that society work, look to maternal health. Because if you have, and it's very fitting, in fact, not just for global health, but for the UK today, if you look at what is happening within your maternal health care, and there are women dying, or they are coming to harm, knowing that nearly every single one of those is an avoidable death and an avoidable harm, then what you're seeing is that there's something fundamentally wrong with either the decision-making that women and their communities have. Do they have the ability to choose if and when to get pregnant? Do they have the right to decide whether or not they have access to healthcare and the means to get to that healthcare, and how are they treated in that facility? Are they slapped? Are they shouted at? Do they fear coming to that facility? What are the political decisions and what are the economic challenges that prevent them from being able to come to that facility? What are the gender biases? So it's much more than simply saying, why don't they just come to the hospital? It is a quagmire of political, economic, social, cultural, systemic challenges that are within a society. I've probably forgotten the question because I'm forgetting.
So why, you know, women's health is not a priority when it comes to pandemics or epidemics?
Yeah, so it's not a priority for all those reasons quite often, but particularly if you're talking about epidemics and pandemics, I mean, we can talk about COVID, we can talk about right now in Uganda, where there is an Ebola outbreak as we speak, is that we get sidetracked. We pull all our resources into trying to deal with the disease that's in front of us. So we pull our healthcare workers out of the existing facilities. We pull money out of those systems. We jig our ambulance services to deal with the Ebola outbreak or whatever it is. And that is important, but it comes at a cost. And that cost comes down to whether or not you value the other service and the importance of that service. I could go on about it for a long time, but you can also read the book.
Thank you, that was great. So now a little bit about publishing, the actual book. So what was your journey to getting published? How intensive was the process? How emotional was the process? Any advice for would-be authors?
Maybe I'll get the last question first. My advice for would-be authors would do it, because I'm going to tell you all the. I'll tell you that it can be a tricky, bumpy journey, but absolutely do it because it's worth it. If you think that you have something that you want to share, if you think that it's something that you want other people to be reading and knowing about, then you absolutely should pursue and stick with it and do it. But my experience, I'll keep it short because my experience was quite a longer journey than I thought. But what I can say is that as I said before, I never planned to write a book, and I really knew, and in many ways still know, nothing about the publishing industry and how it works and how you get a book out there. I was very naive. I thought I'm going to write a book, and it's going to get snapped up, and that's going to be the end of it. But I was wrong. But I was very lucky in some respects. The first stroke of luck was that I read a lot, and I had read books by a very well-established African author of writing on African subjects, Michaela Wrong. And I, in the back of one of her books on Eritrea, which is excellent, there's an interview, and in the interview it says, what do you like to do in your spare time? And she says, well, I like to walk around the parks in North London. And I thought, well, that's convenient, because I really like London too. And so I sent an email expecting nothing, And within 24 hours, I had a very nice response and an invitation to go have coffee. And what came from that was not only lots of advice, but really was some real mentorship on this industry and what it is to try to be writing, particularly in the non-fiction space, particularly in the space where you're writing about Africa. And yes, it was a long bumpy road, but I was very fortunate to have that support. That was invaluable. And Michaela's here tonight, and I thank you very much, Michaela, for all of your support. But my experience of publishing, I'll give you a couple of anecdotes just because they're somewhat amusing and also somewhat shocking. So when I did start to understand a little bit about this industry, I found out that what you are supposed to do is get an agent. And so I started sending out to agents, and I started getting responses. And I went to meet my first agent. And I was really excited, and I went, and she opened the door, and she looked at me, and she cried. And she just said, "I'm just so moved by your book. I'm so touched by what you've written. It meant so much to me. Please, come in, sit down, big wood table, big log fire." She just told me about all the wonderful and grand things that were going to happen in my book, the film that was going to come from my book. I was very excited. My mum cried when I told her. But then I got a message from her the following day that she had also spoken with her colleague, and sadly, they just felt there weren't enough people out there who wanted to read about Africans. And there just wasn't enough people out there who wanted to read about women dying in Africa. And that actually, right now, the industry is really interested in celebrity memoir. And right now, non-fiction, what's really trending is getting to sleep. If you can write a book about trying to get to sleep, that's doing really well. And so sadly, that contract went in the bin. Or maybe not say sadly. But actually, this was something which I found a recurring theme. And I met a publisher, again, we all the same stuff, the wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. But if you could just get some celebrities on the front, that would really help, because people are going to pick up a book about Africa, people are going to pick up a book about women dying in Africa. You need something else. And, I'm very happy to sit here today with a book which I'm incredibly proud of, and that, didn't need to be sensationalized, didn't need an added extra. It is here because it tells a story that's important on its own merits. And so, the outcome of this journey is that I found Neem Press, who have given me absolute respect and involved me in every decision, in every discussion, right down to the beautiful cover of this book, which was made by by wonderful cover designer, but really with my input, and I got to have my voice and explain the significance behind the images that I wanted in that cover and how I wanted it to be. And so really I was very fortunate at where that journey ended. So thank you very much.
Yes, and we're really, I have a medical background, but actually, and that probably sort of really helped me connect with the book. But I think more than that, I spent time in West Africa and as well as Nigeria. And so I think there were a lot of sort of personal elements with regard to Africa, like the huge continent of Africa, you often, sort of minimize. But yes, it's a story that needs to be told. It's a story that people should be reading. And I certainly feel that very strongly in everyone. And we are a women-led press. And I think this story, particularly when you look at everything that's happening in the US or in other countries with regard to abortion rights, etc., I think that maternal health should be on the front page every day. Really feel that very strongly. So, Benjamin, I'm very glad that we ended up in a meeting and the book ended up getting published. So I just wanted to ask you, are you still in contact with your colleagues in the book, Sierra Leoneans, and what's their reaction to the book?
Well, the first thing to say is that many of the people that are in the book are in this room tonight. So yes, I'm still in contact. And actually, something that's quite unusual about this book, in that it's a memoir. There's names of lots of people. I've been told too many names, but there's names of lots of people, and actually, nearly every single one of those names is their real name. And the reason why it's their real name is because every single person named in that book was contacted and was asked if they wanted their name in that book, was given the opportunity to read what was written about them in that book, and the response was overwhelmingly, I am so proud of what I did during that time, of the role that I played. I'm so proud that this story is being written and being shared, and absolutely I want my name in that book. As far as my Sierra Leonean colleagues go, well, the first thing to say really is that this is their book, much more than it's mine. And this is their story much more than it was mine. You know, I have the privilege of being able to go somewhere, and I can leave when I want to leave, and I can dip in and dip out. But when it comes to humanitarian crises, including the Ebola epidemic, they don't have that choice, they don't have that luxury. They stay the long run, and they're still there today. They're still, right now, tonight, in that hospital, fighting to save the lives of women coming very late with very complicated complications. Very complicated complications. The writing is better than I speak. But I am in contact with them. The world's a very small place with WhatsApp, with email, with all the technology that we have today. And actually, I was just WhatsApping with quite a few of them last night to tell them, you know, tonight this is what's happening. And they're so excited, and they're so proud that their story is also being shared. And it is, and they know, and I say it to them repeatedly, this is your book more than it's mine. And I'll be going back to Sierra Leone next month. I'm sure I told my parents. You know, and I will be making sure that they all have a copy of their book for them to be proud of and to hold on to.
I have to say that you were really careful and sensitive to the notion that you are coming from a privileged background and you are writing this book. And I think that shows in the foreword of the book. Testament to your superb attitude. It's really brilliant. So in the book, you've discussed the challenges of working in maternity in the UK and overseas during the epidemics and pandemics. What have been the differences and similarities?
You know, if you'd asked me this question a few years ago, I would have probably gone on all about the differences. And I used to always say, like, you know, doing particularly obstetrics and looking after pregnancy complications, that it's almost two different specialties because of all of those social and economic and structural factors that I mentioned earlier. But I think today I see a lot more similarity because ultimately, you know, what gives good maternal health care? And I think the answer is the same for both. And I think it's actually the same for Ebola as well, and that is listening to the population that you serve, listening to the people around you. We know that in Ebola, and I say this knowing that there's some real experts in the room, so I say this with caution, but we know that with the Ebola epidemic, one of the key errors that were made was that we did not listen to the population that was being impacted the most at the beginning. We made assumptions. We communicated in the wrong way. We know the same, I would say, for COVID, that the communication was not by the people that the different communities listened to. It was very late on that we really started trying to get singers, celebrities, imams, priests, people that are respected across the board, that can speak to all different levels of society. You know, we have Boris Johnson talking to us on the TV. He doesn't talk to most of the population, in my opinion. So I think actually there's a huge amount of similarity, and I think that when we talk about the differences, and I speak of myself as well when I say this, I think sometimes there's a touch of arrogance in our assumption that there is this big difference, because the underlying factors, the underlying issues, the reasons why there's suboptimal care are the same, and that is respect, it is listening, it is communicating and reacting to what we're being told.
Thank you. Last question before we open it up. You've written about your family history. How has this shaped your life choices and dedication to humanitarianism?
Well, a lot of my family are in the room. So a lot of them know my family history. But for those who don't, so I'm Jewish from both sides of my family. From my mother's side, Iranian. From my father's side, a mix of Eastern European descent. But from both sides, there is a history of surviving persecution, displacement, refugees, and I am very privileged. I'm born in the UK and raised in the UK, but my heritage is much broader and much longer than that, and comes with this history. I write about my family history in the book, and I write about both sides of my family and how that has influenced my decisions to work in the humanitarian sector. But ultimately, what it comes down to is, if there are not people willing to support the most vulnerable people at the most vulnerable times in their life, then really we're not a society worth much at all. And for me, I always felt very strongly that I wanted to be part of the humanitarian sector. I wanted to, and you know, I'm no angel, I'm no saint, you know, I've got plenty of faults. But what I mean is, you know, in a selfish way, I work in the humanitarian sector because it gives me so much more, and that does come through my family history and through my family roots. You know, I sit here as an obstetrician. I look after pregnant women with complications, but there's a story in the book. I'm just trying to remember not to ruin it for you all. There's a story in the book about my mother's pregnancy with me, and the role that her obstetrician played in helping my grandmother escape Iran after the Islamic Revolution, at a time when Jews were being persecuted. And so I find it quite fitting that I now work as an obstetrician, helping people who are persecuted, helping those who are displaced, as well as working in the UK. Yeah, I owe all of it to my family and to my family history and the support and love that I have from my family.
Thank you. Any questions? We just have about 5 minutes for questions. Yes?
Can I ask? Can I ask, Ben, at the time that you experienced what you experienced in responding to Ebola in Sierra Leone, pandemics were not a subject that were spoken about. There was much awareness of beyond African countries. Today, to what extent did the Ebola experience in Sierra Leone or in parallel African countries prepare them to respond to COVID?
Well, you know, there's a lot that's been written about how African countries responded to COVID, and there's been a lot of press about, you know, why was COVID not worse in a lot of African countries? You know, there was this expectation at the beginning of COVID, we thought, well, and it was, but we expect this is going to be an absolute disaster. And then in some ways, a lot of the West African countries, and many other African countries, seemingly did a lot better than the high-income countries that have all the global, you know, these big global health institutions, and we thought, you know, why is it that the UK and the US and the European countries seem to be doing so much worse? And I think that, I think a couple of things. I think, first of all, they had experiences, not just of Ebola, but they've had experiences of outbreaks, whether it's cholera, hepatitis E, diphtheria. You know, there's many diseases which we just don't experience, don't see in high-income settings, and so they already had that framework there. And to be honest, when it came to COVID, there was a very straightforward path that we could have followed in our response. There are well-established outbreak response pillars. We just had a government that decided not to. And for me, that was just arrogance. It was an arrogance of, we are a wealthy, rich country. We don't have the same vulnerabilities that they do. But ultimately, what they got right, and what made the big difference, at least in my opinion, is what I was saying before, it's about communication. You look at Senegal. Senegal did really well in this outbreak, in the pandemic, but they very early on had women leaders within their community, respected women who were known in all the different villages, going and speaking with the local people, speaking with their own people in their own terms, and explaining what was happening and the different things they should be doing to reduce their risk. I don't think you can ever underestimate the value of bringing it right down to the grassroots level, and that, I think, is probably, it was the key actually in that difference.
Anyone else?
Thanks. Benjamin, I wonder if you could talk a bit about what you think you would like policymakers to take from your book in this time when we have an Ebola resurgence in Uganda, ongoing outbreaks of other infectious diseases elsewhere in the continent and obviously in other parts of the world. What would the one message be from this?
Thanks. Yeah, I suppose the one message from my book for policymakers, let's say very specific to Ebola, I'm going to be a bit naughty, and I'm going to use the title of something else, not Belly Woman, a report. It's mentioned in the book, and actually my co-author, but there was a couple of co-authors, one of them can't be here tonight, but Alice Jamverin is here tonight. And the title of that report is "Not All That Bleeds is Ebola." And if I was going to get policymakers responding to Ebola outbreaks to take one message, it would be that. Not all that bleeds is Ebola. A woman who's pregnant and hemorrhaging because she's got a placenta previa or a ruptured uterus, or because she's just given birth and she's having a postpartum hemorrhage, does not have Ebola. She has a medical condition which needs immediate, urgent action to save her life. A teenage girl that's been sexually assaulted and is bleeding does not have Ebola. She needs emergency contraception, she needs prevention of HIV and sexually transmitted infections, and she needs clinical and psychological and social supportive care. I could go on, but you can see, whatever it is, whether it's the most, what we might consider to be the most benign of conditions, common complications of modern contraception that cause irregular bleeding, irregular menstruation, early pregnancy bleeding, post-abortion care. If you're a woman in an Ebola outbreak, particularly if you're in a society where you are not valued and your voice is not valued, then you risk being highly stigmatised and being carted off into an Ebola treatment centre, waiting for a result, instead of having life-saving immediate action. And it's not, don't get me wrong, it's not easy, and you'll know if you read the book, it's really difficult to make that call because the stakes are really high. but it does, from a policy point of view, there is really something in saying, take a step back and think. Use your clinical judgment and knowledge, involve your midwives and obstetricians before making a decision which is ultimately going to be incredibly harmful, not only for that woman, but for the whole of her society.
Anyone else before we continue the party? Thank you very much. We'll end the evening now, but I just want to thank you all for coming and have one last request and plea. Reviews are really important for Benjamin and for us as a small publisher. There are algorithms that come into play the more reviews that you have, so please, if you, preferably 5 stars, but just review on Goodreads, on Amazon, on Google, everywhere that you can. And please encourage people to buy the book. It is a fabulous read and a really important one, and an enjoyable one. So, as Benjamin said, yes, it's a serious matter, but actually it's just a very human book. So, yeah, thank you so much for coming.
Just for 1 second, I just want to again say thank you so much to everybody for being here. I'm not going to do thank yous, there's acknowledgements in the book, but thank you everyone for being here, taking the time to share this moment. Please hang around, there'll be drinks, it is a celebration, it is a party, there'll be some food, there'll be books. And just to add to Archna's publicity pre, I'm not a natural self-promoter, but I've come to learn that in publishing there needs to be a bit of self-promotion. You all have smartphones. There's lots of things that are very photogenic in this room. And I'm sure that we all have Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, whatever it is, WhatsApp groups of interested people. Please share within your networks. Please post. Please help us to get the word out about this book. It really is an important story to share. And the publishing industry is a tough industry. There's a lot of voices, there's a lot of shouting, and as I mentioned, unless you've got a big celebrity name behind you, it's hard to get heard. So if I can ask kindly, please help us to get the word out. Thanks. Sorry, I also just want to thank Frontline Club as well. So thank you very much to Frontline Club for hosting us tonight and for helping set up and for the drinks and the food, and it's really special to have this here tonight. So thank you to Frontline Club as well.